Hello and welcome to the Paintless Studio. Today we're going to take a look at some Cadmium Red deeps and mediums. My name's Melissa, I'm a professional painter, and I helped found the Paint List. Today we're going to be looking at Old Holland, we're going to be looking at Michael Harding, we're going to be looking at Vasari, and we're also going to be looking at an interesting offering by Schmincke Norma. Let's talk a little bit about why you might want to use cadmium reds in the first place. I like to use cadmium reds just because I'm a fan of the whole range of cadmium colors, and the reason why is that there are really light fast options within the cadmium reds. There's also some really good opacity. These are also reds that are going to sometimes have almost a little bit of a dustiness when mixed with white, which is something that you're not going to find quite in the same way when you're working with a different sort of pigment like Pyrrole red. Pyrrole red actually can replace some cadmium red mediums, but there is a wide range of hues. And so some of these cadmium reds are going to be veering off cooler, and some of them are going to be really warm, punchy reds. Cadmium red tends to have really good light fastness, even in long-term light fastness testing, which is something you'll also see with Pyrrole, but again, with the cadmium, you might get a little bit more opacity. So there's going to be a lot of difference between the hues across various brands. There's also going to be a lot of difference in the working consistency of these colors. Some of them on one extreme are going to be really opaque, like the Old Holland. Others are going to be really glossy, almost like an ice rink for your palette knife, and that's going to be more like Vasari. And then you're going to find things like Schmincke Norma, Michael Harding, that are somewhere in the middle. So if you're familiar with cadmiums, you know that the naming structure for different brands can kind of be all over the place, which was one of the things that we wanted to bring and share with people on the paint list, because that can be a difficult thing to gauge. And if you need really precise ideas of which colors these are, we actually include some of the closest Munsell chips on the paint list in the review. So the Cadmium Red Middle Vermillion is a really bright, beautiful color by Old Holland. Old Holland colors, if you are familiar with them already, you know this, they come out of the tube fairly stiff, but they're actually a lot more workable than some of the other impasto solutions sometimes. So there is still a glide in this paint that was just marvelous to work with. And the main takeaway for this one for me was the color. One of the things that Old Holland tends to be well known for is a high tinting strength in their cadmium colors, and these cadmium reds were no exception. This was a super strong tinter. This did have that kind of combination of a little bit of resistance, but still a lot of glide and workability. Something that stood out to me with Schmincke Norma, it's formulated differently. We don't know exactly which oils are part of this formulation, but it did actually behave somewhat similarly to Vasari. They're going to be different paints, but there's something about this that if for some reason you're interested in the Vasari glide, but it may not be available for you, you could try the Schmincke Norma. This was a very gliding paint. I was also quite taken and rather surprised as a mid-tier kind of contender, the tinting strength of this color. I would not think of using this color in an impasto way. I would think of it as something that is a lot thinner and overall kind of a surprising addition. The two Michael Harding colors that we took a look at were the Cadmium Red Deep and the Cadmium Red Regular. Just regular cadmium red, which is number 504. And both of these are super high chroma. The cadmium red in Michael Harding was really high chroma, just the regular one. And both of them have a consistency that's kind of in between the Old Holland on one side and the Schmincke Norma and the Vasari on the other. Old Holland's Cadmium Red Deep, when I was using it, I thought it was a little bit thicker than the Cadmium Red Vermillion, but overall this was quite workable for Cadmium Red Deep, which in some brands that are also impasto can tend to be rather stiff, and this one was a little bit more workable than some of the others. Finally, let's talk about Vasari. So Vasari is a company that is shrouded in mystery because they don't always disclose their pigments, but for this, it's cadmium red and they tell you so. So this is quite surprising in that it glides really well, but it's a really high tinter. There was a lot of extra oil that came out with this when we were opening up the tube and doing these comparisons. However, when you integrate that, it just becomes a really, really extremely gliding paint. So while it tends to be very oily, it would lend itself to thin applications. So When we took a look at tinting strength, all of these are really strong tinters. It was super impressive. These are high-powered, high chroma, really intense cadmium reds. They all handle really well as far as tinting strength. Overall, these are fascinating cadmium reds. Have you used any of these reds? Let us know in the comments. We would love to hear what you like about them. If you've had any weird experiences with them, we want to hear about that too. Together, we can all learn more. Thanks so much for joining us today, and happy painting.